Horrific footage is emerging from Kabul in Afghanistan in the aftermath of the ISIS-K terrorist attack, which has killed dozens of people attempting to flee the murderous Taliban regime. The New York Times reports 2 explosions ripped through crowds outside Afghanistan's main airport, just hours after Western governments were warned of an imminent Islamic State attack. The death toll has risen above 70, including at least 13 US soldiers, and more than 140 people were injured in the blasts. No Australians were killed. It is a crisis and tragedy purely of President Joe Biden's own making, and his media responses in the lead-up to the attack have left many onlookers feeling frustrated and angry. First, the Biden administration spent last week doing a media blitz, spruiking its supposedly successful handling of the evacuations and bragging about the lack of deaths outside the airport. Here is Biden on August 19.
It took 2 days to take control of the airport. We have control of the airport now.
Still a lot of pandemonium outside the airport.
Well, there is, but look, but no one's being killed right now. God forgive me if I'm wrong about that, but no one's being killed right now. We got 1,000 somewhere, 1,200 out yesterday, a couple thousand a day, and it's increasing. We're going to get those people out.
But we've all seen the pictures. We've seen those hundreds of people packed into a C-17. We've seen Afghans falling.
That was 4 days ago.
And 7 days later, on August 26, just 1 day out from the attack, and despite the fact thousands of Americans were still stranded in Afghanistan due to his botched military exit, Biden was all smiles.
Thank you all very much, and thank the press for being here. We're going to go private now.
Mr. President, if Americans are still in Afghanistan after what would we do if Americans are still there after the deadline?
And the White House reportedly cut that feed to stop the public hearing Biden's words. The media pack, which to its credit has slowly become tougher on Biden, later questioned his press secretary, Jen Psaki, about what could possibly be so funny.
At the tail end of the president's remarks today about cybersecurity, he was asked about Afghanistan, and he made a joke.
I think Peter asked him that question.
The other Peter did, and he made a joke. So what's so funny?
Well, I think the question he was asked, if I remember correctly, was about when he will provide information about a decision on August 31st. I don't want to paraphrase the question if that was an inaccurate description of the question.
To a lot of people watching.
Of course, it's a very important question. And I think what he conveyed is that he has not, well, what I can convey from here, I should say, is that as he stated yesterday, and as the Secretary of State just stated, we're on track to complete our mission by August 31st.
And even after the suicide bombings, the jokes didn't stop.
I'll take a few more questions, but you, sir.
I wanted to ask you.
That's okay.
Perhaps he is too senile to realise the horror his actions have created. Whatever the reason, it is disgraceful, unprecedented, and a shocking indictment on those journalists who let this administration get used to a media protection racket. This is the first time Biden has truly been asked tough questions across the political spectrum, and he has failed. So used to not having to explain himself to a loving media, we are now witnessing scenes of a US president fleeing press conferences, refusing to explain the reasoning behind his decisions. And whatever the criticisms you may have of Trump, everyone knows he would have stood there for hours and answered every question reporters threw at him, probably against the wishes of his media team. But that demonstrates the difference in leadership styles. Biden goes where he is told and stops talking when his minders cut the audio. If someone did that to Trump, he would probably have sacked them. However, the world is stuck with Biden, and I truly hope journalists stop letting him walk away without explaining the latest mess he has dragged us all into. Now let's bring in the panel, journalist Rebecca Weiser, and from the Herald Sun, Caleb Bond. Caleb, let's start with you. What do you make of the way that Joe Biden has handled this, particularly from a media and a PR strategy perspective?
Oh, it's been absolutely abysmal. I mean, we talked about this last week when Biden sort of rushed off to Camp David after giving one presser, and what we've had in the week since then has been no better. He has, as James Morrow called him earlier in the week, become walk-away Joe. Whenever he gets a tough question, he leaves the press conference. He doesn't want to answer it. The questions you get out of him are pretty middling anyway. And there was the image we saw this week of Biden under questioning from a Fox News journalist, and he's standing there at the press conference bowing his head as though he can't take the question. Please don't do it to me, let me go. I mean, come on. This guy is the President of the United States, the leader of the free world. And for all of his faults, and Trump had many of them, he always stood up at a press conference and took questions. Now, he didn't always give the answers that journalists wanted, and he was prone to criticising journalists, sometimes unfairly and harshly. But you could never accuse Trump of not being available to the media. You could never accuse him of not standing up when he had to stand up. And Biden, time and again, demonstrates that he doesn't want to do that. If you don't want to stand up in front of the American people, which is what this is, I mean, you're standing there with a room full of journalists, but you are talking to the American people. And if you don't want to do that, and you can't explain your point of view, particularly when you have such a disastrous news event happening, like pulling out of Afghanistan, which, by the way, said we're still on track, we're leaving by August the 31st. They've just had 12 US troops die in the US, and the response from Biden is so weak. If you're not up to that part of the job, talking to the people who elected you, then you don't deserve to be there.
And Rebecca, Caleb raises a good point. It is a tough job. It's probably the toughest job that exists. Do you think he's up to it?
Well, looking at the way the media has handled it, maybe they don't think he's up to it. For example, MSNBC has simply spent a week where they didn't cover the fall of Kabul. They didn't cover the unfolding disaster in Afghanistan. What we've seen from the media is that we used to just see Joe Biden eating a soft serve ice cream, and that was emblematic. The media was just a soft serve. I think they are frightened for their man. They put him in the White House, they cheered it on. And now the coverage from the media that adores him seems to suggest that they're embarrassed to cover him.